Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely crucial, a highly classified tactical survival briefing. You know, to figure out how we actually survived this bizarre new world we find ourselves in, we really have to dig into the exact science, the biology, basically the whole shebang of the entities we're sharing it with. We are going to break down the mechanics of our deeply transformed Earth and figure out exactly what humanity is up against. Let's get right to it.
For centuries, human science fiction always imagined these massive threats dropping out of the sky to scorch our cities, right? But, well, that's just not what happened. As the briefing notes point out so perfectly, we didn't lose the surface to some fiery apocalyptic land invasion. No, we were outmaneuvered by an enemy that entirely bypassed our continents. They sank straight down into the crushing, pitch-black depths of our own oceans and built an empire where we literally couldn't even reach them.
And that brings us to where we are, sitting here right now. The year is 3000. And I need to stress this isn't some speculative projection or a historical look back at the Great Descent of 2890. This is humanity's active, harrowing reality today. We are sharing our planet with a vastly superior intelligence. And honestly, the clock is ticking on our remaining resources.
Which brings us to the ultimate strategic question, the one keeping everyone awake at night. How do you fight an enemy that rules from the darkest depths of the ocean? I mean, how do you wage a war against a civilization operating 6 miles underwater, protected by thousands of atmospheres of pressure? Over the course of this explainer, we're going to completely deconstruct the enemy's biology, their technology, and how exactly humanity is fighting back.
Section 1. Earth under the Deep, the Invasion. Now, what's really interesting about this is that they didn't just stumble upon Earth. They were actually forced here. Back in 2842, human astronomers confirmed the existence of Planet X, this dark, icy super-Earth way out in the Oort cloud with an ultra-pressurized subsurface ocean. But then, a passing rogue brown dwarf gravitationally knocked Planet X into a highly eccentric orbit. Facing the total destruction of their ecosystem, the Abyssals launched these massive biological arks. By 2890, they breached our atmosphere, totally ignored the landmasses, and plunged straight into the Challenger Deep of the Mariana Trench. Just 60 years later, in 2950, their new underwater empire was fully operational.
That empire is centered in Arlaye Prime, which is a true deep trench megacity. And it's just mind-blowing to think about. We are talking about a massive, hyper-pressurized metropolis anchored literally 6 miles below sea level. It glows with this intense 470-nanometer blue-green and ultraviolet bioluminescence, and because they settled in the deep ocean, they have direct access to vast deposits of oceanic biogenic silica and deep-sea basalt. They don't even need to mine the surface at all. They power their entire civilization exclusively through cold fusion silicon arrays, just using the raw materials right there on the trench floor.
Section 2. Anatomy of the Invaders. Biological Deconstruction. So, to defeat an enemy, you absolutely have to understand exactly what they're made of. And when you compare the sheer scales of intelligence here, it is staggering. To put it into perspective, a human brain has roughly 86 billion centralized neurons. An adult abyssal, which by the way spans roughly 30 meters long, possesses a decentralized multi-threaded consciousness. Their central ring alone houses over 100 billion quantum-dense core neurons, and their tentacles hold an astonishing 500 billion autonomous sensory motor neurons. Their biological brain mass vastly outcalculates human supercomputers. It allows them to simultaneously calculate complex physical equations, control deep-sea hydropressures, and pilot their ships all at once.
But here's the catch, and it's a critical one. The major biological hurdle is that they are extreme piezophiles. Because they evolved in the ultra-pressurized subterranean oceans of Planet X, their soft tissue relies on internal hydrostatic counterpressure. They literally require depths exceeding 1,000 bar, that's 1,000 atmospheres, just to keep their cell structures from breaking down. Without that immense, crushing weight of the deep ocean pushing in on them, these massive 30-meter entities would decompress and completely explode.
And that brings us to the grim reality of their biology. They don't have internal digestive tracts for solid matter. Actually, scratch that, they don't eat solid food at all. They are hemovores. They rely on the direct absorption of human blood plasma. Human hemoglobin acts as both their primary energy substrate and a psychoactive vector. This biological necessity is, chillingly, the sole reason humanity wasn't entirely wiped out upon their arrival, and it dictates the entire structure of the occupation we're living under today.
Section 3. Living Ships and Quantum Tech.
So you're probably wondering, if they explode without 1,000 atmospheres of pressure, how on earth do they harvest humans up on the surface? Well, they solve their biological pressure vulnerability through a truly brilliant feat of engineering. An individual Abyssal pilots a 100-foot biomechanical bioship. The biosilicon hull of this ship effectively seals in that 1,000-bar deep-sea pressure, so when they rise up above the bathypelagic zone, the vessel acts as a mobile environmental suit. These massive warships double as vital life support systems, holding that immense high pressure inward to protect the pilot from explosive decompression when they enter Earth's lighter atmosphere.
Section 4. The Blood Economy. Coastal Harvest Hubs.
And this brilliantly illustrates how this technological bridge to the surface enables a grim, massive logistical operation. The scientific optimization here is honestly terrifying. In these processing pods built in flooded ruins like Tokyo and San Francisco, captive humans undergo intermittent hypobaric conditioning. During rest cycles, they're kept in low oxygen chambers to simulate high altitude. This forces extreme red blood cell production, a condition called polycythemia. Then, standard normobaric oxygen is restored during working hours so the humans don't just collapse while refining and assembling quantum molecular silicon components from infinite ocean floor sediment. They even use automated genetic screening to prevent generational bottlenecks. It is a flawlessly optimized, entirely industrial loop.
But thankfully, that is not the whole story. 35%. That is the fraction of humanity left uncaptured following the collapse of individual nation-states. And this 35%? They form the absolute foundation of the global resistance.
Section 5. The Mountain Resistance, Humanity's Arsenal.
Formed in 2915, this uncaptured population created the Human Alliance, or HA. Humanity's arsenal isn't down on the coasts anymore. We operate a massive asymmetric war from heavily fortified, high-altitude mountain redoubts, primarily the Swiss Alps, the Tibetan Plateau, and the Rocky Mountains, places entirely out of reach for aquatic forces. Let's move to and see how this builds into an active tactical doctrine. The HA Navy doesn't actually need a weapon big enough to incinerate a 100-foot beast. Against their pressurized biohulls, we use supercavitating kinetic torpedoes tipped with tungsten carbide. Why? Remember that 1,000-bar internal pressure? If a torpedo causes a kinetic hull breach near the surface, the alien's own internal pressure causes instant explosive decompression. And against their oceanic biosilicon pylons, we deploy hyperdense enzymatic plumes that sink down to the abyssal trenches and literally dissolve their structures. We have completely turned their high-pressure biology and silicon architecture into lethal vulnerabilities.
Which leaves us right on the edge. Both sides are currently locked in this brutal, high-attrition standoff across the deep-sea axis. But with our mountain resources drying up and their oceanic empire pushing further and further inland, what happens when this tense gridlock inevitably breaks into absolute, full-scale naval warfare? How long can humanity really hold out before the oceans boil over? Keep these facts in mind, because that flashpoint, it is definitely coming. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and stay vigilant out there.